Welcome to Strategic Alternatives, the RBC Capital Markets podcast. Today, we're on location at RBC's Global Financial Institutions Conference here in New York, and I'm speaking with Bettina Orlopp, CEO of Commerzbank. Bettina recently joined RBC CEO Dave McKay for a conversation at the World Economic Forum in Davos, where they explored how banks are navigating transformation across technology, sustainability, and global competition. We're continuing that dialogue today by exploring how these forces are reshaping the future of financial institutions and what it will take for banks to lead through the next wave of transformation. So, Bettina, with that set up, welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you on.
Thank you for having me.
Bettina, you're leading at a time when institutions are being forced to really rethink their role, relevance, and resilience. As you look to the future, what are the top 2 or 3 strategic shifts that you see as most critical for Commerzbank right now?
One thing which is front and center probably in everybody's mind and debate, and that is AI, clearly. And that is fostering all the things we care about. Growth on the one side when it comes to revenues, because with AI, we will clearly free up capacities for our relationship managers. But it's also a big, big lever for transformation, for improving efficiency, and for helping us to achieving our targets even quicker than we thought.
So, in a landscape where many banks are racing to modernize and, as you said, increasingly employ AI, where do you see the greatest opportunity from an operational efficiency standpoint, but also from a decision-making standpoint, whether that's how you deploy technology, organize teams, improve process workflows, et cetera?
You can't say that there is one area of the bank which will not be touched by that. You really need to review all your processes, your products, your infrastructure, and need to figure out where can you be faster, more efficient, where you can prevent fraud. Clearly, every process which is repetitive, which involves high data volumes, but also which is pretty complex, is a good one to think about whether you can change and adjust that by AI. That's one part of the story. But then also the whole topic about customer interface. How do you interact with clients? How do you create value for your clients? How do you get seen by clients is an important angle. And then for a bank, it is also driving our loan portfolio. With whom do we bank? I mean, investors think about AI when they look through their industries to see which industry is impacted most by AI. We as lenders need to do exactly the same thing because we need to figure out who's impacted, who's fast, and who's probably lagging behind when it comes to the adoption of AI. So very different perspectives we need to take, and we need to make sure that we get our clients on board, but we also need to get our staff on board on that endeavor.
And again, we're talking about AI everywhere at the conference today, which shouldn't be a surprise. We're also talking a lot about the macro environment in
Yeah.
a lot of these sessions. So I want to talk a little about client trust and competitive differentiation when it comes to Commerzbank. How do you think about sort of maintaining and deepening that client trust as a competitive differentiator, especially in a time where we have so much geopolitical turmoil,
Yeah.
but also digital disruption as well?
I think banking is all about trust. Without trust, and we all know that from also negative examples, you can't survive. So trust is everything, and trust is something you need to earn. It's specifically important when it comes to AI that you think about consumer protection, that you think about data protection and things like that. And trust means also, we see it with our corporate clients. One of the big strengths of Commerzbank is that we are a lender for quite a while, that we know many, many of our corporate clients, also the medium-sized clients, for a long time, and that they know that we are at their side for good and bad times. And if a client enters our intensive care team, sometimes it happens, our clear objective is to get them out in the real world and not taking the wrong exit. And that is something which clients, specifically in times like this with lots of volatility and insecurity, they really value that. And we get that also reflected in our client feedback.
So maybe we could turn to the European banking landscape, particularly around consolidation, cross-border activity, and whether scale remains a genuine competitive advantage.
Well, scale is important to some extent because if you have a subcritical size, you will not be successful. So if you're a smaller player, you really need to pick your battles and you need to think about where can you really make a difference. But it's also very clear that in Europe, with a non-existent banking union, cross-border synergies are at least so far limited. So for cross-border synergies, we need to have a certain extent of joint protection scheme, deposit protection scheme, and other things. And then also when you think about AI, Scale can be helpful, but sometimes also helpful to have a very simple business model and to act pretty fast on certain things, and that you do not have a complicated matrix in place and things like that, which we all know from larger players, but rather be someone who can move rather quickly on things. And then with respect to consolidation per se, I'm a big fan of consolidation, but you have to look at each and every single transaction to figure out whether a transaction makes sense or not. And then I'm a strong believer that you should always do it jointly, because banking is all about trust. And you can only preserve trust if you keep your stakeholders on board.
Sustainability remains high on the agenda. Can you talk a little about your perspective on how client demand for sustainable finance solutions is evolving, kind of what you're seeing, but also where you see Commerzbank creating sort of real value in that
Yeah,
space?
clients believe, and also we as a bank believe, that it is an important topic which we also need to support. Absolutely, yes. And when you look on the corporate client side, we always said, however, you cannot move from 0 to 100. It's really a transformation path. And that is something people need to keep in mind. You can't change overnight. We spend a lot of effort also when providing products in financing this sustainable transformation, and also financing corporates who are not perceived as green as someone would wish for, but who are on a clear path towards this transformation. And that includes not only the right financing products for that, but also includes clearly the issuances. We have lots of green bonds issuances. And on the private client side, we see in a demand also for green mortgages and things like that. And that story will continue.
Bettina, you've led transformation from multiple vantage points: finance, risk, HR, and now as CEO. What leadership lessons have guided you through change and helped you build institutional resilience?
Well, first of all, I think it's always good to know a company from different angles. And I had the luxury, as you described, to see the bank, Commerzbank, from very different angles. I started as a head of strategy, where you have the benefit of seeing everything. If you're responsible for HR, if you're responsible for compliance, you see many, many different areas. And then as a CFO again, you see all areas of the bank. When you really want to move a company and a culture and team, you need to be aligned. I believe very much in bottom-up development of targets. I believe very much in alignment, and also communication, communication, communication. A strategy which is not understood by the people will not be implemented. An AI tool or a large language model which is rolled out to everybody, but people do not understand it, they are not trained in it, will not be applied. Technology which is creating fear instead of optimism is also not the right tool. So it's all about getting people on board.
Our global research team puts out a product, RBC Imagine, released the 5 transformational forces affecting every sector. That report highlights the shift towards platform-based finance with tokenized assets, embedded payments, and digital identity. How do you see these trends reshaping your clients' needs, and what capabilities do you need to adapt from a bank perspective
Yeah.
to serve those needs?
Well, you need to make sure that you have the infrastructure in place. We have been the first player in Germany to apply for a crypto custody license. We will provide crypto trading at Comdirect. We are part of Agora, which is a global initiative of financial institutions together with central banks to make sure that we think about tokenized assets and digital assets. We are part of stable coin initiatives. Clients are also moving in this direction, slower probably than we thought. But at this stage, I think it's very important to invest in the different baskets and see what is really evolving and what is really accepted by the client side.
So one last question. What defines a successful bank in the next 5, 7, 10 years in your view? But also what will separate those who lead from those that are start to fall behind?
You need to have an excellent profitability, that's for sure. To really have the resilience to absorb crisis, but also to have the capacity to do investments, because constant investment innovation will define whether you will be successful or not. And the speed of innovation and the openness for innovation is clearly something which will be the differentiator between a more successful and a less successful bank. And we definitely will be part of the successful banks.
Bettina, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
We hope you enjoyed the conference. We hope you have a
Absolutely.
safe trip home.
Yeah, thank
And
you.
hopefully we'll have you here again.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
Thanks for listening to Strategic Alternatives, the RBC Capital Markets podcast. This episode was recorded on March 10th, 2026. Listen and subscribe to Strategic Alternatives on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to learn more or continue the conversation, please visit rbccm.com/strategic alternatives or contact your RBC representative. See you all next time.
This content is based on information available at the time it was recorded and is for informational purposes only. It is not an offer to buy or sell or a solicitation, and no recommendations are implied. It is outside the scope of this communication to consider whether it is suitable for you and your financial objectives.